let me share my screen again, and let's just play the clip. This is what I was when I was talking about Brian Kilmeade like gnashing his teeth. Like let's listen to this part about the drones.
And we're going to fix this system.
What are you going to do about President Putin? Because we just saw these drones in Poland.
Yeah, well,
more sanctions.
I mean, I'm not going to defend anybody, but the Poland, they were actually knocked down and they fell into an area. But you shouldn't be close to Poland anyway.
Right.
So I solved, as you know, 7 wars. 7. I did so many, including Pakistan and India, but big ones. And we're going to fix this.
Okay, so first of all, I want everyone to keep that in the back of their mind. The 7 wars thing that he solved, keep that in the back of your mind because that's going to come back up. But real quick, that was Friday morning, and there's more to that clip. That was just one of the clips that I found. But this is from RT. This is a different moment where he's asked about it, and he says the same thing. He says, his quote is, the headline is, for those listening, Trump downplays claims of Russian drone incursion into Poland. The U.S. president has said the whole incident could have been a mistake. And the quote is, asked by reporters on Thursday about Warsaw's claims, Trump responded, quote, could have been a mistake, but regardless, I'm not happy about anything having to do with that whole situation, but hopefully it's going to come to an end. And you can read into that multiple ways. You could read into it that the mistake was that Russia accidentally flew too close to Poland and crashed a drone into Polish territory, or you could read into it that Poland made a mistake and those weren't even Russian drones and those were something totally different, and they're effectively lying to us about what they shot down, or even if anything got shot down at all. But I see multiple layers in what he's saying there, where he says it could have been a mistake. I don't buy any of it, and I think Trump, every single time it's brought up, he basically backs Putin, and he says this is not what y'all think it is, and that was what got Brian Kilmeade so worked up when he would not bite on Putin.
Yeah, totally agree with that, and I also want to show something because speaking of some of the players here and which direction we might lean in, is that we're not just sovereign alliance shills. Well, we are. We're professional sovereign alliance shills, but there's a reason for that. Ghost, this is a little bit of a rerun. I would call this a soft rerun. Do you remember this little incident?
Yes, I do. Yes.
For anybody who needs a refresher, on November 15th, 2022, a missile struck Polish territory in the village of Polish Word near the border with Ukraine, killing 2 people. The incident occurred during attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure by Russia. It was the first incident of a foreign missile hitting NATO territory during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Initially, Ukraine accused Russia of striking Poland, while the U.S. claimed the missile was likely to have been an air defense missile fired by Ukrainian forces at an incoming Russian missile. This was later confirmed by Polish prosecutor's office, which stated the explosion was caused by an out-of-control air defense missile. Now, even that eventual narrative, I think, is bullshit. I think it is likely that was a direct false flag attack by a NATO proxy state onto a terrestrial NATO state in order to provoke the U.S. or NATO escalation kinetically with Russia. Mm-hmm. But look at how they had to backpedal on that narrative, and they were like, okay, well, it was a Ukrainian missile, but it was an accident. So just saying, it's kind of interesting that we've got Poland shooting down Russian drones while Russia says that there was no encroachment, and Donald Trump, to your point, and in that clip, clearly sidestepping the issue. Looks to me like a little bit of a 2022 November 15th rerun.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, and a great callback. Yeah, and real quick, 1 second, let me pull this up. I don't have the right thing selected yet, but just give me a second. So just to, we were talking about NGOs a minute ago, so if you want to share my screen, I just want to make clear like what I'm talking about here. So Slovakia and Georgia are both two countries that are not in NATO. I think they're like observing members. Like they're in the very long process of joining NATO, but they're not official members yet. But they're trying. But like the NATO people want them to become members, right? And so Slovakia here's Fico, May 15th of 2024, being shot. And
by the way, one of the guys you guys should remember from last week, if you did your homework, Fico was one of two NATO-adjacent, NATO-aligned countries that were present at the Shanghai Cooperation not at that one, but at the China Victory Day parade in Beijing.
Yes, correct. Yeah, the China Victory Day parade. And the other one was Serbia, which is this country right here. So it was a Serbian president, and it was Slovakian prime minister. And then so that was May 15th, 2024. And Politico is reporting he's going to survive. 5 times in the chest, he was shot. And then here is a week later. This is May 23rd, 2024. And the Georgian prime minister, who was in the process of passing the law that Fico had just passed, saying that an EU official had called him and threatened him that he would face the same fate as Fico if he continued down this path. And then, of course, he did continue on the path. And then there were color revolutions and regime change operations, protests in the street, summer of love, basically, in Georgia last summer, 2024. And so here's Georgia. And if you look just geography, General Quast always says, read the book, The Revenge of Geography. You have to understand geography to understand what they're doing. And if you look at the pincer move that they're trying to do geographically against Russia, Slovakia shares a border with Ukraine, just like Poland does. Georgia obviously represents a totally different theater of war against Russia. So if you could get Georgia into NATO, and now this guy is trying to move Georgia away from joining NATO, you can now introduce a totally new theater against Putin right there by Dagestan. So very important to understand like why they're targeting these specific countries and why these specific countries, I think, are aligning themselves with Putin to move away from NATO.
Well said. And speaking of geography, and look at the country right smack dab in the middle of Slovakia and Serbia. I speculated, I think at GART, just one of my darts at the board is that if you see a public turn from within NATO, I believe it's going to come from Viktor Orban in Hungary. I believe he is the pebble that could start an ouch narratively. He's sort of persona non grata within NATO because he's probably the most openly cordial and supportive. He's not openly supportive of Putin, but he is openly aligned with him business-wise.
He's pretty damn close. He's pretty. Yeah. I mean, he's pretty damn close. He's the one who like went to Moscow last year and basically acted as the leader of the EU. Like they were even. I think the Russian media was even calling him the president of the EU, even though he wasn't, obviously. But he was acting like the leader of the EU.
Well, he was actually technically at that point. He was the acting. He was the acting lead counsel or whatever they call it.
That's right. I think you're right. I think it was like
it's ceremonial, but
yeah, it was it was ceremonial. But he was certainly acting as like the sovereign leader of the EU, and he was like aligning himself with Putin. And then here he is, September 8th, so a week ago, saying Orban warns EU of collapse as the bloc might not survive without reform and an end to the Ukraine conflict. The Hungarian prime minister believes. And he says, quote, the EU is currently on the verge of falling apart and has entered a state of fragmentation. And if this continues like this, it will go down in history as the depressing end result of a once noble experiment, Orban stated. And what's interesting is that the longer version of that clip from Colonel McGregor, where Judge Napolitano is asking him about the patience of Putin, what McGregor goes on to say is, well, yeah, Putin just all he has to do is just wait. Like one of the reasons that he's going very slow right now is because all of the economies of like not only the political systems, but the economies of Europe are collapsing. And I mean, France's government literally collapsed last week. And what that means is that their legislature took a vote of no confidence in the prime minister because he basically asked them to, because he was asked to find $44 billion in cuts in the budget that was impossible to find. And so he said, okay, like I'm done. Like I don't let's hold a vote of no confidence. Go ahead and vote me out. He's the 6th prime minister under Macron to face a vote of no confidence. So Macron is still president of France, but they have their legislature right now.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a great call with Orban, but back in August, like I said, it's not because I'm some super genius that is seeing this coming. It's because I'm looking at these as characters, as cognitive ciphers, forwarding a war of stories. I think the war of stories is going in our favor. By that, I mean sovereignty, the sovereign alliance versus collectivism, collectivist superstates such as NATO, which is, one of the big darts on one of the big things we need to dismantle. And before we dismantle it, actually, I believe we need the public mandate to do that, not just from the U.S., but from within NATO. We need public mandate from the people in these countries. And honestly, and I think Orban is the signal setter here. What form will it take? I'll go ahead and just shamelessly speculate or baselessly speculate. I think Orban will leave NATO. I think that Hungary will leave NATO and will make a very big show of it, and will do it. And their story, I believe, will be that they are trying to avoid catastrophic war with Russia, and that they want peace. And I think that they will leave NATO or turn publicly on NATO as a show of peace. And I think Trump will endorse that, basically, and boost it. Baseless, who knows if that's going to happen. But I'm tracking this based on
sense.
Based on the characters. And then furthermore, to that second point, I'd be interested in your response on it when you mentioned France there. I don't think we're going to get World War III. But I do believe that the warmongers in the EU and NATO are going to bring us right up to the precipice, narratively. And in my opinion, how can this be used against them from a war of stories perspective? Trump is giving NATO all the rope it needs to hang itself, in my view, in the collective mind. And I can't bring this up on my screen because for some reason I cannot get into True Social on my on this computer. But I did take a screenshot of Donald Trump's truth post that I thought was fascinating and maps onto this idea of...
Do you want me to pull it up?
It's the one where it's Trump to all NATO nations.
Okay.
That I think it was from today on his True Social feed. But yeah, while you pull that up, I can start reading it. So Trump said, Trump wrote a letter to all NATO nations and the world. He says, quote, "I'm ready to do major sanctions on Russia when all NATO nations have agreed and started to do the same thing. When all NATO nations stop buying oil from Russia, and as you know, NATO's commitment to win has been far less than 100%, and the purchase of Russian oil by some has been shocking. It greatly weakens your negotiating position and bargaining power over Russia. Anyway, I'm ready to go when you are. Just say when. I believe that this, plus NATO as a group placing 50% to 100% tariffs on China to be fully withdrawn after the war with Russia and Ukraine has ended, will also be of great help in ending this deadly but ridiculous war. China has a strong control." Here we go. If you want to zoom in a little bit on that. Where are we at? China has a strong control and even grip over Russia, and these powerful tariffs will break that grip. This is not Trump's war. It would never have started if I was president. It's Biden's and Zelensky's war, the Our Boys. Shout out to the Our Boys. And I'm only here to help stop it and save thousands of Russian and Ukrainian lives. If NATO does as I say, the war will end quickly, and all those lives will be saved. If not, you are just wasting my time and the time, energy, and money of the United States. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So there's a lot in this statement, but on the macro, what I took away from it is I think this maps onto the idea that Donald Trump is allowing NATO to hang themselves in full view of the public. And I also agree with him when he's talking about China decoupling and breaking away to break the grip between Russia and China. We talked about that last week, the idea of some of these economic pincers seemingly against sovereign alliance members, or sovereign alliance members kind of going to war with each other economically. I think they're actually doing it to break the globalist system. So there's a lot in here, but I think the main takeaway is Trump is saying, we see what you're doing, NATO, narratively, with Russia and China. Why don't you go the extra mile and put your money where your mouth is, and we'll see if I join you in the effort. But I think this is a bluff. I think this is him saying, calling NATO's bluff rather, and trying to get them to expose themselves fully in front of the collective mind.
Yeah, that's well said. And here I want to pull this up because this is directly related to what you're saying. And I want to point out, by the way, you mentioned Hungary and Viktor Orban. Before we pivot away from Hungary too far, it's worth pointing out that George Soros, born and raised in Budapest, the capital of Hungary. The official narrative, he did an interview in the 90s on 60 Minutes. And apparently what happened, the official story is that like somebody saw the interview before they aired it. And they were like, dude, you cannot air this interview. This makes you look like a Bond villain. You cannot air it. So they put it on the shelf. And then somebody from 60 Minutes took it, left from the office, and then uploaded it to the internet. And that's how it's now. That's how it's on the internet now. But basically, that's
the one where he basically was like, I'm not sad that I turned in the Jews or something.
Yeah, that's the one where he admits that he worked for the Hitler Youth. Because the way that Hungary, the way that Budapest was brought into the Third Reich was the Nazis didn't go into Budapest and round up the Jews. They worked at this group. I think they were called like the Red Arrow or something. It was basically their affiliate in Hungary, and it was the Red Arrow that went around, and it was the summer of 1945, so it was the very end of World War II, where they rounded up, I think it was 500,000 is the official narrative, but I mean, who knows if any of that stuff is even true. But the narrative is that he went around and pointed out all the people and said, they're Jewish, they're Jewish, they're Jewish. And then the guy asked, do you ever...
Why did the CIA take so long to declassify documents related to...
He goes, no, because if I didn't do it, somebody else would have done it. Like who cares? So point is that I can say this I can actually confirm what I'm about to say, because I went to Budapest in June of 2017 and saw this with my own eyes. Not only was Viktor Orban back then rebuilding Budapest, they were tearing down all the communist
by hand, on his hands and knees. Go saw him.
He was rebuilding it, but they were tearing down all of the communist, because Budapest, it's Buda and Pest. It's two towns on opposite sides of the river that runs through it. And for 40 days, the Russians were on one side, the Germans were on the other, and they were just shelling each other for 40 days. So it's like beautiful Baroque architecture, and then the next building is the ugliest like communist building with tiny little windows. And so they're going around tearing down all these old communist buildings and then rebuilding the old Baroque building exactly as it was prior to World War II. And Viktor Orban was one running it. On top of that, there were billboards everywhere. And my wife's cousin was his friend was a tour guide of Budapest. So he was like giving us a tour and explained all this to us. All these billboards everywhere. And I knew at this point who George Soros was. George Soros's face was everywhere. And it said on every single one, this guy is public enemy number one, like basically fuck George Soros. That's what it said. And all of it was state funded. He's banned for life. He's not allowed to enter Hungary. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, holy shit, whoever the guy is in charge of this place, don't know who that is. He's based as hell. And then I later learned about Viktor Orban. So, but I can confirm, because I saw it with my own eyes, that was happening in Hungary. So
he saw Viktor Orban on his hands
and knees, rebuilding Hungary,
chiseling the bricks, laying the mortar himself. Yeah. No, that's great, man. Little random connection in my neck of the woods is that my father-in-law, whose house I am at, is Hungarian.
Really?
So the plot thickens.
Dude, Hungary.
Yeah, his name's Tibor.
They're awesome. They're awesome.
Yeah, his name is Tibor.
Really?
So I was like,
Tibor.
I have never heard that name until I met him. You know, my wife's like, yeah, my dad Tibor. I'm like, Tibor?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Because good Canadian boy. He was born and raised in Canada, but his father, straight off the boat, like fled Hungary during the war with his German wife, German baby mama. But yeah, that's wild times. Hungary is an interesting place.
Well, you go to some places in Europe, like France and Italy, and like the tourist traps places, and the locals will get really fed up with like the tourism. So they'll be like, they will have an attitude with you. But you go to places like Prague and Czech Republic and Budapest and Hungary, and they love Americans and they love American culture. And, because they were living behind the wall, they were living in the Soviet Union. So they all love America. They're super nice to you, and they're just great people. So I have nothing but nice things to say about Hungary in the very short time that I spent there.
Yeah, I get the impression. I've only, we don't see him a whole lot these days, but his father's still kicking, Opa, and Opa, and he's a based dude, tradesman his whole life, Hungarian tradesman, and I think he's a Trump guy. He doesn't talk politics, but he's a Trump guy for sure.
Hell yeah.
But I think Orban is kind of a signal setter over there in more theaters than one, and I think that his part to play will be interesting to watch. And I want to transition us into the U.S. here. I don't want to go 4 hours tonight, even though I say that every time, but it's because I am obviously Ghost and I can do these shows a lot, and we will do these shows a lot because this is an evergreen topic, and there's so many theaters to it. So we've hit the sort of NGO aspect. We've hit kind of. Go ahead if you have something else there.
Well, do your transition and then let me play this video because this perfectly transitions us. It's Lindsey Graham, so it perfectly transitions us to the next to where you want to go. But go ahead and do the transition.
Yeah. So, like I said, I mean, these seem like different theaters, right? I kind of had three in my mind for tonight: Charlie Kirk, NGOs, Dark Money Web. Then we've got Russia, Poland, 2022 missile rerun crap going on. Essentially, saber rattling between NATO and Russia saying, we literally just want peace and to get rid of Nazis. Interestingly, to your point, we have a Hungarian thread running through it from the NGO dark money networks. And then we've got the most prominent one being this Hungarian. We've got Viktor Orban prominently re-entering the narrative. And seemingly disconnected, but I don't think disconnected at all, which Ghost will help explain. I wanted to talk about the North American theater in the sovereign war, in the sovereign alliance. To set this up a little bit, on a macro, we know that a couple of weeks ago went viral that Trump took out the cartel boat, right? He's obviously declared very public war on the cartels. We've got aircraft carrier off of was it off of Venezuela, or it's pretty far off there?
It's not an aircraft carrier, but I think it's seven Navy ships, like 5,000 sailors. Yeah, so it's like a nuclear submarine. I mean, it's a whole fleet, but I don't think there's.
We've got a presence, and it was publicly announced that presence is specifically to wage kinetic war on the cartels. And Ghost is going to talk about how he thinks this is going on. But I would suggest that this is all part of the same theater. This is all, different theaters of the same war. From Charlie Kirk's assassination and the unraveling of NGO dark money networks to NATO warmongering, benefiting from NGO dark money networks, to globalist cartels operating in South America that Trump is waging kinetic war on. Where do you think they're getting their money from? And why is Donald Trump so focused on even Canada and Justin Trudeau and talking about them aiding and abetting this kind of activity, along with Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico? So I think that these are similar theaters. And last week, Ghost and I spent a lot of time talking about how we think Russia and China, Putin and Xi, are directly attacking the sort of globalist system. I think Xi is doing it through economic warfare. I think Putin is doing it through kinetic denazification efforts, and also using energy as a weapon, the withholding of energy on the NATO bloc. But I think Trump is also waging some more kinetic war than we are usually told about in the info war, and it seems to be against the cartels. I would just suggest that everything we've talked about tonight and in other episodes about the Azov Battalion, etc., you can probably apply a lot of this to what's unraveling in South America. And we may even, to Ghost Research, have an Our Boy Z on our situation. And I know Chris Paul is really deep in the Venezuela rabbit hole like you are. So what do you think's going on in terms of the North American hemisphere of the sovereign war? What is Trump doing in that theater? Does he have any support? What's the narrative, and then what do you think is the actual?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So basically, the narrative is that Trump has declared these cartels terrorist organizations, right? And he's using. I went a few. It was either last week or the week before. On my geopolitics show, I actually spent the first hour just reading through like the George Bush executive orders that Trump was citing back in January when he did this, and I went through like what classifies a terrorist organization, like what are the standards that you have to meet in order to become a terrorist organization. And it was pretty vague. I mean, it wasn't anything terribly specific. What was really funny though is as I'm reading through it, I was just laughing. I was like, dude, this big pharma absolutely qualifies. COVID 2020 2021, big pharma 100% checks every single one of these boxes, and it's not even hard to apply that standard.
It's not a stretch.
It's not a stretch at all. It's all about like doing operations against the American people, with the intent of changing the politics, changing the government, changing people's lives, like harming people. I mean, it's very easy, I think, to reach that standard. And so I think where a lot of us thought
shoe brands have been lying to you. Do you want to know
this was going to go is that Trump was going to clean house, like get rid of the deep state in the U.S. and then use the U.S. as a vehicle to go out and like cleanse the world, right? But the more I thought about that, it's like that's kind of like the neocon dream, right? I mean, that's what George Bush always talked about the world police being. And that doesn't really make sense. Even if you believe in the Sovereign Alliance and you think that like he's working with all these people, that doesn't really make sense. It doesn't make sense for us to be the world police that go around and cleanse and clean up all these neighborhoods for everybody else. It makes more sense that we're all going to do it together at the same time. And these networks are going to get eaten away from the bottom up slowly, like over time. And they're going to be done by the book, and it's going to be done through lawfare, and it's going to be done, with some kinetic operations when it makes sense. Before we get to Venezuela, though, pull up my tab, because this actually is very relevant. Here is Lindsey Graham on September 11th, and listen to what him and Richard Blumenthal do. By the way, the guy standing to the left of Lindsey Graham, I have pictures of this. In 2011, Richard Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham, along with Marco Rubio, went with John McCain to Libya and met with the leaders of would-be ISIS a few months later, who overthrew Gaddafi and raided his armory, sent the weapons to Turkey, which were then walked into Syria to create ISIS. So Lindsey Graham literally helped create ISIS. I mean, Lindsey Graham is a state sponsor of terrorism, and he played a material role in creating ISIS. Listen to what he says about Putin here on September 11th.
So there are, 4 countries under U.S. law that have the designation of being a state sponsor of terrorism? We're here today say you need to add one more. So this legislation, if passed, would designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law until they return the children. If you want to vote no, we will make you famous. You need to vote. Thune and Schumer need to bring this bill up soon so we can tell Europe and the rest of the world, follow our lead. What does it matter to be a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law? Your economy is radioactive. You do business with Russia at your own peril. We have laws on the books that punish state sponsor of terrorism. It's hard to get on that list. Well, let me tell you, Russia's earned the right to be on this list. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll out our bill today. We're going to ask leaders of both parties to give us a chance to debate this and vote on it. And we want to put in motion right now a process that would lead quickly to Russia being a state sponsor of terrorism, telling everybody in the world who props up Putin, you're running afoul of U.S. law, and we're watching what you're doing.
Not
and you're
that.
gonna pay a heavy price. It's one thing to go after their oil sales. We're doing that. But somebody needs to speak up for the children. We're doing that today. And we're going to have all of our colleagues lend their voice to our cause. And we're going to make Russia, under U.S. law, what they are. Terrorists. This is what terrorists do. They rape, they murder, they kidnap. So I'm looking forward to this debate. As you can tell, I'm looking forward to this vote. And if Russia doesn't want to be a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law, return the children.
Yeah, and then he goes on to pull this like marker out, and they have the 4 countries listed, and he writes Russia in this really dramatic, ridiculous presentation. But what he's doing is he's trying to co-opt, I think, Trump's like play, like because that's what Trump did to all the cartels down in Venezuela. And again, to that point, let's I think there's one other video that's worth watching about Venezuela that is going to be very, very relevant. And that is, I thought I had this one pulled up, but give me 1 second.
By the way, guys, depending on how this episode, this segment goes here, this last segment, we've basically already done this privately, but there is a council, inner circle of inner circle Badlands. I think right now it just consists of me, Ghost, and Chris, who are in charge of officially certifying or decertifying sovereign bros.
Yes.
And Chris did submit a certain character as a sovereign bro.